Not every NFL matchup is between evenly matched teams. Sometimes there are mismatches on the level only seen in the college game. And while it may never get as bad as something like Alabama versus the Citadel, there have been plenty of one-sided affairs during the Super Bowl era. And today we will be counting down the 10 most lopsided. We make these determinations, as we always do, by using C-score, a metric created by this channel in order to evaluate every single team of the Super Bowl era by doing so much more than just looking at its record. For a deeper explanation about how C-score works, be sure to check out the description of this video. The way we do this is pretty simple. We take the C-score of the two teams involved. The larger the gap between the two, the more lopsided that matchup is. We did not want to use any team from the same season more than once, so at the end of the video, we will highlight a few different matchups that would have otherwise made the list. Wanted to take a quick moment to shout you out and thank you for joining us today. Please do the whole YouTube thing if it so moves you, like, share, and subscribe, and ding that notification bell. Is there any chance whatsoever that these mismatches provided for an upset? Let's go ahead and find out together. Our number 10 entry comes to us from week 12 of the 1985 season, and just based on that year, we might be able to figure out what team we're talking about. It is, of course, the 1985 Chicago Bears and their matchup with the Atlanta Falcons. The C-score gap between these two teams is 74.916. Looking at the Bears first, of course, they qualify as C-score's highest rated team. They did everything you could imagine, putting together a C-score of 52.163. The Falcons, on the other end, are kind of on the other end of the spectrum here, 4-12. Worst in the league in points allowed, third worst in points scored. They did play a tough third in the league strength of schedule. Their C-score came in at negative 22.753. As for the game itself, it was in Chicago and the Falcons never stood a chance, going down by a score of 36-0. Our matchup at number 9 will also come from a year that will probably indicate who the team is going to be. This was a divisional matchup, so we've got week 9 of the 1972 season, and we've also got week 12 of that same year. And of course, we're talking about the undefeated Miami Dolphins and their two matchups with the New England Patriots. These matchups give us a C-score spread of 75.098. The Dolphins in 1972, of course, were a great team, but they also played one of the easiest schedules of the entire Super Bowl era. Still, that C-score is great at 33.076, but most of the heavy lifting of this matchup is being done by the Patriots. They did go 3-11, but those 3 wins are very flattering. They got outscored by 254 points and were bottom 3 in points scored and points allowed. Their C-score is further from zero than the Dolphins at negative 42.022. That didn't stop Miami from absolutely obliterating the Patriots in that first matchup, 52-0. The second matchup was at Schaefer Stadium, and the Pats were a little bit more competitive, only going down by a score of 37-21. We move ahead to the 1991 season for our number 8 entry. This matchup took place in week 4 between the eventual Super Bowl champion Washington Redskins and the Cincinnati Bengals. The difference between these two teams in C-score is 75.861, and it was Washington doing the heavy lifting here. A 14-2 team that absolutely dominated throughout the season, Washington put up the second best C-score of the entire era at 51.468. The Bengals were in the midst of what is now known as their lost decade, only going 3-13 this season, finishing dead last in the league in points allowed, and putting up a C-score of negative 24.393. This game, however, was quite competitive, with the Redskins blowing a 27-10 lead in the second half. Cincy tied things up at 27 before Washington scored at the end to win it 34-27. Number 7 gives us our first matchup that does not include that season's eventual Super Bowl champion. From Week 4 of the 1973 season, we have the Los Angeles Rams on the road to face the Houston Oilers. The gap between these two, 76.908. The Rams were an excellent team in '73, constantly victims of the playoff rotational system that left them on the road in the playoffs. They were 12-2, led the league in scoring, and had a C-score of 34.087. The Oilers were in the midst of one of the worst runs of the Super Bowl era, and this season for them was rock bottom, winning just one game, being outscored by almost 250 points, and landing themselves a C-score of negative 42.821. The Rams led this game by 19 points in the fourth quarter before Houston tacked on a couple of late ones to make it look a little closer than it was. The Rams did win the game 31-26. We move ahead now to number 6, and we are back with eventual Super Bowl champions. Week 10 of the 2009 season gave us the matchup between the New Orleans Saints and the St. Louis Rams. The Rams, having been on the positive side of the last entry, are on the negative side of this one. The gap between these two teams is 76.929. And the Saints, as we mentioned, became Super Bowl champions this season. A 13-0 start became 13-3. They outscored their opponents by more than 10 points per game, mainly because they were the league's highest scoring team. Their C-score sits just under 34 at 33.991. But the major factor in the gap between these two teams are the Rams. This is the single worst team of the entire free agency and salary cap era, worse than expansion teams that came along during that time. They were 1-15, were near the bottom in everything, and on top of that did not play a difficult schedule. Their C-score is negative 42.938. But once again, we have ourselves a game that was kind of close. It was a one-score affair until the fourth quarter when the Saints took a 28-17 lead. The Rams did score late to make it look a little closer, but the final score was New Orleans 28-23. For our number 5 entry, we go back to the first season of the Super Bowl era, Week 7 in particular, and a pretty unfair matchup here between the defending NFL champion, the eventual NFL champion Green Bay Packers, and an expansion team in the Atlanta Falcons. The total C-score gap here is 77.735. And of all the teams that won championships for the Packers during the 60s, it's probably between this 66 team and the 62 team for who's best. This Packers team went 12-2, outscored their opponents by 172 points, and gave us a 40-plus C-score at 40.852. And as an expansion team, you might suspect that the Falcons would struggle, and they did, winning 3 games but getting outscored by 233 points. Only a historically bad New York Giants defense prevented Atlanta from finishing last in both points scored and points allowed this year. The game itself was not pretty. The Packers took it to Atlanta 56-3. The 1970 NFL season was an interesting one on many fronts. It gives us our number 4 entry from the second to last week of the year, and the matchup here was between the Minnesota Vikings and the Boston Patriots as they were then known. The Vikings outclassed the Patriots in C-score to the tune of 78.369. This was the second consecutive year of absolute dominance by the Vikings that did not result in a championship. They finished 12-2, led the league in defensive scoring, third best in scoring, and played a top 10 schedule to boot. Their C-score was 37.823, and somehow in the opposite direction, the Patriots were even worse. 2-12, minus 212 in the point differential, dead last in scoring, dead last in points allowed. Their C-score was negative 40.546. This game was at the Patriots, but it wasn't exactly competitive, with the Vikings winning it 35-14. We did say 2 years in a row for the Vikings, didn't we? Here they are again at number 3 from Week 10 in 1969. Their opponents on that day were the Pittsburgh Steelers, and the gap between these two teams is 78.735. Now, in 1969, the Vikings were NFL champions, leading the league in points scored and points allowed, outscoring their opponents by almost 250 points. They did lose in the Super Bowl, but their C-score was 43.178. The Steelers, on the other hand, had yet to begin their dynasty. This was the first year under Chuck Noll, but it was a painful one, winning just one game, finishing last in points allowed and second to last in points scored. Their C-score was negative 35.557. As for the game itself, this was part of a Viking 12-game winning streak, and Pittsburgh offered little to no resistance in a 52-14 loss. We move ahead to number 2, but for the second consecutive entry, we only back up one season, and for the second consecutive entry, we're dealing with a team that did not win that year's Super Bowl. This was Week 2 of the 1968 season, but it was also Week 12 of that same season. These two teams are now division rivals. We're talking about the Baltimore Colts and the Atlanta Falcons, now in their third year of existence. These two teams break the 80-point barrier in C-score gap at 80.979. The 68 Colts are fairly well documented, a 13-1 team, just thoroughly dominant in almost every single aspect, getting to and losing Super Bowl III in a bit of a fluke to the New York Jets. That doesn't stop their C-score from hitting almost unattainable heights at 49.372. The Falcons are improved since their expansion season, but not by much. They may have played the league's hardest schedule, but they didn't do a good job against it, going 2-12 and putting up their own negative C-score of 31.607. That said, the first matchup between these two teams in Atlanta was kind of close. Baltimore did win it 28-20, but the return game at Memorial Stadium, not so much. A 44-0 Colts victory. The single most lopsided matchup of the Super Bowl era does not include that season's eventual Super Bowl champion, nor does it include that season's eventual Super Bowl competitor, but it does include the single worst team of the entire Super Bowl era. Week 13, 1976, the matchup is between the Pittsburgh Steelers and the expansion Tampa Bay Buccaneers. These C-score gaps have been elevating slightly, but this one takes the cake. The gap here is 89.346. The 76 Steelers were two-time defending Super Bowl champions. They got off to a poor start this year, but the way they closed made many believe that this was the best of all the Steeler teams, even though they couldn't make it to the Super Bowl. Their C-score was 38.703. Then we have the lowly Buccaneers, a team whose accomplishments will probably never again see the light of day. 0-14, being outscored by almost 300 points, a C-score of a negative 50.645. Tampa was placed in the AFC this season, with their expansion brethren Seattle Seahawks placed in the NFC. Tampa played every team in the AFC that year and were unlucky enough to draw Pittsburgh in Pittsburgh at the end of the year while the Steelers were on fire. The final score of this one, 42-0. As mentioned earlier, there were other matchups that we didn't use so as not to repeat the same team over and over again. 3 of those involved the Buccaneers from '76, including matchups with the Cincinnati Bengals, the Baltimore Colts, and that season's eventual Super Bowl champion Oakland Raiders. The Baltimore Colts are involved again, this time from 1968, with their matchup against the Pittsburgh Steelers. None of these games were particularly close. So to answer our question from the beginning of this video, no, none of these games provided us any upsets. But upsets were to be found during the Super Bowl era, and we will be coming out with a video soon counting down the 10 biggest ones. Be on the lookout for that one. As far as this video goes, was there anything here that surprised you? A matchup you were expecting to see but didn't? A matchup that made the list that you weren't expecting to see? Sound off on these topics or anything else you may have on your mind down in the comments section below. Thank you once again for taking the time to join us today, and until next time, I hope you have an awesome day.